Welcome everyone. My name is Nate Ceres. I am on the product marketing team for Azure, and this session is Java experts at Microsoft. So this is a Q&A session. So we'd like to leave as much time as possible for the audience to ask questions for our great panel, which is mostly in person, and also we have one person that is on Teams. So before we get started, I'm just going to go through a little housekeeping, and then we can dive in. So just be aware this session is being recorded and will be made available on demand. I won't read the rest of this. Okay, let's do some introductions, and then I will explain how to ask questions, and then we'll go into it. So I mentioned my name is Nate. I also want to have the panel introduce themselves. So let's start with Brian and then go around, and then we'll do Bruno.
My name is Brian Benz. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and been at Microsoft about 10 years, working with Java for most of that time.
Hi, my name is Mark Heckler. I'm a principal cloud advocate of Java and JVM languages. Don't want to leave out Kotlin or Groovy here. Been here with Microsoft a couple of years, but have a little bit of background in Java SE and even a little bit of IoT, and then of course EE and Spring, of course, and some Quarkus.
Hi, my name is Srikanta. I work on the Azure SDK for Java team. I've been at Microsoft for 4 years now.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm a software engineer on the Java engineering team at Microsoft, and I'm a VM engineer working on improvements to OpenJDK and the Microsoft build of OpenJDK.
Bruno, you on?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Bruno. I'm a PM on the Java engineering team, and that's it.
Thank you, panel. I think, again, a lot of great experience here. So this is a hybrid session, which means we have you in the room, of course, and then we also have people on Teams. So how that will work is if you're in person, it's pretty straightforward. You can just raise your hand if you have a question. If you are online, we're asking that you put your questions in the chat, and then I will read them out to the panelists here in the room. You know, I think anything related to Java is on theme for this, but some topics that you can ask us about, Java development best practices, you know, anything to do with developer tooling as it relates to Java and Microsoft, things like VS Code and GitHub are usually popular. Azure service support for Java, monitoring and troubleshooting, and also how Microsoft uses Java. That's kind of an interesting topic. We actually use it quite a bit internally for our own systems and tools. So I know we had a question come in the chat, so I'm going to get started with that question. So this is from Christine. Her question is, are there plans for tooling to convert a large, massive Java project to C#?
No. Next question. Just kidding. I have no inside knowledge.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, the new Copilot actually does have code translation, but not sure how good it is. But obviously, it's not going to translate a big project, you know, the whole thing. But it will do code to code, and it will do C# to Java as well. So.
Yeah, anytime you're talking about anything more than a trivial project, you have a lot of things that are involved besides and probably more important than the code in many ways, at least more difficult to make the translation, I'll put it that way. So as Brian mentioned, I mean, there have been a lot of interesting you know, write-ups on using Copilot to translate, to modernize, and some of them have some really quirky and interesting outcomes. But that would be probably the place I would start to look. But you will be doing a lot of manual lifting, I think, by the time it's all said and done for a complex project, which sounds like this is.
I actually got a couple responses from Christine. So she is saying it's not that complex. Most of the code is pretty simple. There's just a lot of it. They are divesting from Oracle, which I guess is motivating this. But yeah, it sounds like, you know, it could be worth trying some of the Copilot capabilities. Here.
Well, I guess, and not to take this in too different a direction, but when you say divesting from Oracle, the OpenJDK has been around for several years now. So Oracle doesn't control any of the OpenJDK builds. They don't offer support for the OpenJDK build. So if you're looking to, and I'm not picking on Oracle here, but if you're looking to insulate yourself from a particular company, then certainly there are ways to do that without retooling from Java.
Yeah, we should also. Go ahead, Bruno.
Yeah, we had lots of customers asking this sort of questions about do I have to move away from Java to continue because of the cost and etc. And the real answer is no, you don't have to move away from Java to continue to use a free technology. Java is free, is open source, and there are binaries of Java from different vendors. Oracle themselves provide a free JDK binary called the Oracle Open JDK binary, and they also provided the commercial Java binary for our customers interested in that compliance and support. But besides Oracle, other companies, including Microsoft, also provide binaries of Java that can be used in production without any extra cost. What we do provide at Microsoft is commercial support for our JDK for customers running Java workloads on Azure and across Microsoft Cloud technologies and services. So customers don't necessarily have to spend months rewriting a Java application into any different language, whether that's C# or not. It's beyond the point. They can definitely continue using Java and continue using the expertise that their teams have built over many years and continue to be invested in the technology and just switch between a commercial binary of Java from any vendor and use a free binary of Java, or go with a commercial support of a Java binary, but in a different context where the cost will be within the budget of the company.
Hey, I just want to add as well. I mean, we don't want to create the perception that you would have to convert to any particular language to run on Azure either. Java runs just fine on Azure. You could run your applications as is. If you want to run them on C#, we're agnostic about that. Basically, we're creating a cloud where you can run any platform, any language as well as possible. Ideally the best platform to use any language on. So I just want to mention that as well.
Yeah, all great points. Thank you, panel, for the answers to that question. I think we have a question from the room. Okay, so this is a two-part question. I'm just going to repeat it for everyone on the call. So the first one was, how can we leverage GitHub Copilot with Java or for Java? And the second one was, are there any plans for a plugin for SDS? Got it. Okay. Panel.
Well, I'll start us out, and then looks like Brian and I were like racing. We don't want to leave you out either. I mean, please feel free to jump in here. Just say, stop it. Let me answer this one. But I'll speak to just what I've done with Copilot, with VS Code, and with another IDE. Copilot works really well with Java code. It's and I always I always try to reiterate to folks, it is a Copilot. So I mean, you're still driving, you're still in charge. But I find it extremely useful in a lot of ways. Now, occasionally it comes up with something you're like, no, that's not what I wanted, because it still doesn't read minds. But it does a remarkably good job of proposing methods or like test contents and things like that. And many times, even if it's not exactly what you had in mind, it gives you a canvas to work with. I worked for a gentleman years ago who would always say it's easier to critique than create. And sometimes if you just let it spit it out into let's say a unit test, and then you do something with that, it's much easier to go, oh, that's not quite what I had in mind, and you can adjust that very quickly, and within a very, very short period of time, you have a super robust test or method or what have you. So I find it super helpful within that context.
Yeah, I think if you want to have like boilerplate code, it's great for those things as well. Like how do you handle exceptions? How do you close a stream and those kinds of things? It's really great for those as well.
I was going to add as well, just one thing that gets lost in the messaging sometimes. We focus on VS Code, but there is an IntelliJ plugin for Copilot as well. So it actually works with, it works well with Copilot. So the IntelliJ IDEA plugin is out there and available as well. I was going to say as well, when you're working with Java, one of the things I use it for is boilerplate code for Java, but also if you're working with Kubernetes or something, it'll generate a deployment manifest for you. Something that you might not be as well versed in as Java. I had this situation where I was trying to deploy Cassandra on a VM and just went out to OpenAI and said, hey, can you give me a deployment manifest for this repo? And I went out to the Cassandra repo. It generated one that almost worked. It worked pretty much 90% out of the box. All I needed to do was change one thing, which is just a reference to a container registry, and everything worked. And I didn't need to know anything about YAML or that particular package or Cassandra or anything. I was just able to deploy it. So that was pretty amazing. So that's what I kind of use it for, not just basic Java code, but things that I don't want. CSS, if you're using CSS in a web page or something. And yeah.
Just to repeat that question for those online, it was, can Copilot expedite unit testing?
Yes, I'll just start off the answer and then toss the hot potato. But yes, it can. I've used it to build out unit tests as well.
Yeah, it also has some context about your project, so it can leverage that and build functional unit tests.
Great. Any other questions in the room? Okay, I'm not seeing any right now. There is a question in the chat. So this question is, I'm a .NET developer, sensing a theme here, looking to migrate a background process written using Java 8 to Azure. Is there any other better service to run background processes other than a function, an Azure function? Is it suitable to containerize a background process written using Java 8?
Java EE?
Java 8.
Java 8. What I would throw out just as a, gosh, I feel bad. I don't want to jump in. Does somebody else want to go first? Okay, I don't want to like jump to the front of the line here every time. But what I like to kind of keep in mind is the frequency and duration of something that executes when it comes to deciding whether to make it a function or not. If something executes all the time, you probably should have an ongoing service that runs just kind of sitting back there running, because the advantage of a function is a quick spin up and shut down. And if it's just basically running all the time anyway, I'm not sure that's a great use of the strengths of functions. Or if it doesn't spin up and shut down all the time, but it tends to run for an extended length of time and then shut down and then just restart again, same thing. So again, it depends on your use case. If you have something that runs very sporadically, infrequently, and is a very short duration, then probably your Azure functions would be a good way to go with that. I can't say that I've done Java 8. I've done Java 11 and 17 with Azure functions, but I do believe we support back to 8 on those. I don't know for sure. But anyway, I would evaluate your options. I mean, you have scale to zero options in other deployment targets as well using Java. So things like container apps would be a good option as well. I've also done build to Java native image and containers, and done a scale to zero with ACA, and that works well as well. So you have options.
To complement the options on Azure, there is a service called Azure Batch that you can develop your applications and use it to schedule those executions. And then on Azure Batch, you can schedule whatever job you want and configure VMs to run those jobs. So inside, you can do whatever version of Java you need, certainly. As for integrations with other capabilities, like triggers from different events across Azure services, then Azure Functions is more suited for that task. But there are other services. I've seen customers with a combination of Azure Function and Azure Container apps or container instances where functions is used as the trigger, and then the workload is actually executed on another containerized environment. So there's a lot of mix and match that can be done. And regarding Java 8, yes, it is supported, and it's supported across all Azure services, that version of Java.
Yeah, I was just going to add as an aside, Java 8 is supported, but we do have a lot of resources to upgrade to 11 or 17, and it will help your performance, even if you don't want to. Just putting it out there.
Okay, there's a few questions online. Oh, I will take another one from the room for fairness.
So in terms of new Java versions, there have timeline versions on OpenJDK, on Azure, or are you just doing LTS releases, or what's the question?
Yeah, so to repeat the question, pretty much what are our support timelines for new versions of Java, for example, on Azure or with our JDK, and that type of thing?
So right now, 11 and 17 are the LTS versions that you can download. So every patch set update that that comes out, there will be a new version of 11 and 17. And I believe the next LTS version is going to be 21. And 20 came out in March. So 21, I think, is going to be the next patch set update. And Bruno can definitely jump in and correct me on timelines. I think LTS versions are supported for at least 6 years. So those are a pretty safe bet. And Java 8 is still supported, but yeah, we do encourage moving to the other versions.
Yeah, we have a support documentation that we published the dates of when these LTS long-term support versions are meant to be supported until, and we classify as until at least. We may, of course, extend those dates as we approach those dates and we get customer feedback on their usage of those versions. So there's always a chance that we can extend and prolong the life of a major version. As for the release cadence, it's I'm not sure, Stephanie, if you mentioned this, but it's every quarter we release a new update of those LTS releases. And besides 11 and 17 for the Microsoft build of OpenJDK, we also provide commercial support within Azure for the Eclipse Adoptium binaries for Java 8. So Java 8 is commercially supported on Azure through the Eclipse Adoption binaries that we, Microsoft, also participate in the development and testing of those binaries.
And all the Azure SDK libraries for Java also are baselined at Java 8, but we do support higher versions of Java. So we do run all our tests on Java 17, which is the latest LTS.
Great, thank you. So a few more questions came in the chat. This sounds like one I would have written as a canned question, but it is a one in the chat from Caleb. So what is our support for frameworks such as Spring? I think you have to go first, Mark.
I'm reaching for the mic this time, but I'll happily let anybody else jump in. We're very well. I guess let me start off by saying that we're partners with VMware, and prior to VMware's acquisition, Pivotal. So we have a very good relationship, as you might imagine, in terms of things like Azure Spring Apps, which evolved from Azure Spring Cloud, which is based around the idea that we should have a way to support idea to production using Spring Boot and Spring Cloud libraries, and all the constructs that you might expect in terms of orchestrating microservices. So our support for Spring is excellent, from everything from Spring Framework, Spring Security, Spring Cloud, all of the various different Spring umbrella projects, and all the way down to the JDK, as Bruno mentioned. But we support it end-to-end. We have multiple ways to deploy Spring Boot-based applications, and I've done Spring Cloud Function to Azure Functions. I mean, it's a very good relationship. We have a close association with the Spring team, so we, when we do identify anything that maybe needs a little love or could stand to be polished or improved or extended, we work it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we also have Spring Boot starter libraries that are wrapped around the core Java libraries.
Any comments on other frameworks? Because I noticed that was part of the question. It's kind of open-ended, but
I mean, we certainly don't hold anybody else at arm's length. Spring has roughly 70% of the enterprise Java ecosystem under wraps, so they're kind of the big presence in the room, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we also do work with folks from Quarkus. We have, in fact, we did a workshop yesterday where we did Quarkus and Java on ACA deployments, and Micronaut and whatever else you might throw at it. I mean, basically, we want to be your best destination for Java applications, bar none. So yeah, we work with all the teams. We just have, again, probably a special relationship with the Spring team based on their heft in the market and the length of time we've been working with them, and the length of time, frankly, that Spring has been around. I mean, Spring has far outstripped in terms of longevity anybody else, but so obviously they're a presence to deal with, to be reckoned with.
I should mention as well our support for GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps. They run on these things called hosted agents and hosted runners. And inside those runners, there's software pre-installed. And we have Maven and Gradle and the JDKs and several other things that are required by all of these frameworks to actually build and test and run. That are all built in. So you don't actually need to do anything special to run your applications on Cloud Shell, which accesses all the Azure tools. Also, like I mentioned, GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps as well. So full support.
Great question. Good answers. So I have another question in chat. Just checking the room, though. Any questions from the room? Okay, I'll give you time to think. So this question, so can you talk about using WSL2? What does that stand for?
It's Windows Subsystem for Linux. It's just Ubuntu running on Windows.
Thank you. Windows Subsystem for Linux on Visual Code, maybe Visual Studio Code, to develop Java applications and select the correct Java runtime and compiler.
Somebody had a write-up a while ago on this, on selecting I believe it was one of our colleagues, Sandra, had a write-up on selecting changing the JDK and the default runners that actually run on top of these frameworks. So there is a way to change the setting. I can't remember what it is right now. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, there is a way to convert those. WSL already, you do have to install the JDK and the Azure CLI and things like that. If you go into our Cloud Shell, it actually has full bash support. And also, you go to shell.azure.com or through the portal. It also has full bash support, plus has all those things pre-installed, the Azure CLI, Docker, Maven, Gradle, JDKs, and things like that. And you can change the default version as well. But if you're using WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux, on Windows, you do need to install all that stuff using apt-get or other methods as well. So hopefully that helps. By the way, just a little trivia. So it's kind of an awkward name, Windows Subsystem for Linux. And that's because the original DOS was called Windows Subsystem because DOS was too easy. So, yeah.
That is interesting. Interesting trivia. Any questions in the room? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Business rules, many business rules basically change over a period, and I don't want to change in my code. I just want to do the like in database for I have a file for my rules. Just go and change those rules, and then it's automatically adapt those rules and work.
Okay.
So do you have any of it?
Yeah, the question is, does Microsoft have any offering for a rules-based service where you don't have to change the code to change the business rules? You can just upload a configuration file or something like that, and it changes it for you.
There is a service called Azure Logic Apps where you can sort of develop those integration roles, not necessarily business roles. But with the logic apps, you can design some flow where you can change the flow without changing the application code. But that would probably require that you do leverage serverless and Azure functions, so you can have the business functions well defined, and then you use logic apps to define your flow. There are other solutions in the market that you can certainly deploy on Azure. Red Hat has an open source project called Rules that is a rules engine, and you can definitely write a Java application that uses rules as your rules engine mechanism. And then once you have a business change, you can just update the configuration file of rules and redeploy your application, basically. But it's just one example. But what you're actually talking about is probably business process management solutions. And yes, there is a whole market of BPM solutions out there. Some of them are implemented in Java. Some of them are integrated with Java, meaning that your business application code can be written in Java, but your business process defined somewhere else. And then you have that integration. And then you deploy that on Azure, whether it's on App Service, AKS, Azure Spring Apps, and so on. It doesn't really matter as long as you have your business process management solution integrated with your application.
That as well, there's, different ways to do that with Service Bus and other add-ons you can use, Logic Apps, as Bruno mentioned, functions. And we are the corporate custodians of a library package called Dapper, which allows you to add sidecars to your application. And there's all kinds of built-in business logic in there as well. And so plenty of flexibility.
Great. Thank you. Another question from the chat. So in Azure App Service, what is the best way to deploy a Spring Boot application? And what is the best practice for handling the logging? So I guess this could also be expanded to just in general best practice for logging to keep it maybe a little bit broader.
I can start that off. So the way that I generally do it, there's multiple ways actually. When you create a new app service, there's a deployment center where you can deploy from different sources. The way I do it is with GitHub Actions. There's actually a little button when you set up a new app service, and I'll be showing this tomorrow in a session at 10:15. .NET and Java on Azure. Anyway, the way you do it, you just literally turn that on, and it enables CI/CD, which generates a GitHub action, and you choose which GitHub repo you want to put this action in, and it will publish the action, set up a publishing token, and then deploy back to the app service that you just created. So that's the most seamless way to do it, is through GitHub Actions and just generating that action. But there's other ways as well. Did you want to mention?
I mean, that's the real life production way. If you're just trying to get started up developing, I use scripting and AZ or AZD, but so I'm not sure where you were going with it, but I mean, you do have options. Brian's right. I mean, that's the way I would lean heavily toward, once you have things in place and you want to be able to just push updates to the repo and then let it go ahead and deploy for you.
And in terms of monitoring,
I think there are other source versioning systems also supported with app services. So yeah, not just GitHub, you can integrate with other places as well.
Correct. Yeah, you can go all the way from FTP to there's GitLab and Bitbucket and other sources as well you can deploy from as well in a similar way without actions. But monitoring is also. Anyone want to cover monitoring? We didn't. Yeah, we have. I mean, there's built-in logs. You can go. You can use this thing called Kudu, which is if you go to your website, which is azurewebsites.net, whatever the name of your website is, .azurewebsites.net. If you add .scm.azurewebsites.net, you can go into the app service runtime, and you could actually look at the deployment logs. But if you want to do it on a more robust and useful basis, you could use Azure Monitor and the application analytics that we have built in Azure Monitor for Java. There's some that come out by default when you add Azure Monitor, and there's others where you can add a instrumentation key to your code if you want to specifically monitor certain things as well. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions in the room? Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, you know, are there any best practices around troubleshooting Java applications? And I think you gave an example about Azure Spring Apps and having to have a storage account connected before running the application, and that not necessarily being obvious. But I guess in general too, like what are some of the best practices for troubleshooting your Java apps on Azure?
I feel like I've been taking too many answers. But yeah, no, I mean, in terms of troubleshooting, you know, the IDE yourself, we have some pretty good Spring integration with VS Code. That's at the code level. And then actually, once again, Azure Monitor and Application Insights generally give you good insights into what may or may not be the problem inside your application. Even if it's performing well, it'll give you latency and other information as well. That's generally what I'm familiar with.
Mark, any comments maybe specific to Spring or Azure Spring Apps, since that was in the question?
I mean, I sympathize. Believe me, I do on that regard with the storage. I kind of would, I guess, reiterate what Brian's saying, and we can talk offline later on if you want to maybe, because what I tend to lean toward is debugging in the application itself, but then also chasing logs and trying to see what's going on. If you're talking about a complex distributed system, you know, watching the traces among the different services is probably most helpful. But from there, I mean, it's again, it's a lot of the analytics and kind of finding the exceptions. So,
thanks, panel. Any other questions in the room? Oh, I like this question. So any advice for teams that are migrating from .NET to Java?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, is there any advice for teams that are migrating from .NET to Java? Yeah.
There is one advice I would give: don't create methods with a capital letter in the beginning. That's not a Java thing. No, but in general, I think the main advice would be to get familiarized with the Java ecosystem and not feel afraid of or anxious, actually, about the variety of options in the ecosystem. One of the key differences between .NET and Java when it comes to ecosystem is Microsoft has been investing for decades now in .NET, and a lot of solutions to problems come from Microsoft within the .NET ecosystem, where Java for many decades had this ecosystem of very multiple vendors and multiple solutions for the same problem. So sometimes a .NET developer can find themselves a little bit lost in trying to figure out what is the best solution for a problem. And the reality is there's no such thing as the best solution. There are solutions that will work for most people. There are solutions that are safe bets, but any solution is a great solution. And recently somebody asked me, what is the de facto library for this problem in Java? And I was like, there's no such thing as a de facto library for any problem in Java. Just logging has 5 different frameworks for logging in the Java ecosystem. So you can imagine that, yes, you will find lots of different implementations for a particular problem in the Java ecosystem. Just don't be afraid of trying them. And if you don't have the time to try many of them, just go with, just pick one and play with it and see how it goes.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, the difference in the ecosystems is pretty amazing, and not necessarily one better or worse. It's just that it's certainly differently structured because Microsoft wasn't the dominant player in Java, and there is truly no dominant player because Sun created Java, but they very much built everything out in the community. So, and then of course, as we know, Oracle bought Sun and whatever. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that there is a vast and rich ecosystem and community in the Java world. So we have some really great resources, aka.ms/Java-Azure, which will get you started kind of with the Java on Azure type of focal areas. But certainly just go out and do a search, and you'll be surprised at the wealth of information on a particular problem domain or a particular maybe tool chain question or anything of that nature. And there are a lot of community contributors who aren't associated with Microsoft or Oracle or any other big player who are out there just giving of themselves freely. And there's just a wealth of expertise out there for the taking. So reference our stuff, obviously, because it can help you, find your footing better on when you're looking to move within the Azure ecosystem. But don't be afraid to reach out, as Bruno said, and evaluate the 15 different libraries or 3 different solutions or whatever that somebody is advocating for a particular problem.
Yeah, and also the dependency management and how you deal with diamond dependencies is widely different with what .NET offers, and Maven and Gradle, they both handle it differently. So getting familiar with which build system you're picking and how they handle dependencies and conflicts would be a good thing to know before you start. Also, when you are starting with a new Java project, always try to pick the latest LTS version.
Very good advice. Another question in the room?
Yeah, I was wondering
Can I start with this?
Yeah, I'll just say the question. So question is there a decision-making framework for choosing between Java or Kotlin or Scala? I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'll give you my take, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's right, but I have strong reasoning behind it. I guess I'll put it that way. So your mileage may vary. Scala has in concept, it was supposed to be fully interoperable with Java, but you often found out that it really wasn't. It was there was a schism within the JVM community, and many times you had it was an either or, quite frankly. And Scala has seen more community engagement and more traction in the past than it is now. I don't necessarily know that I would discourage anyone from using it, but that wouldn't even make my list probably for the top choices unless there was a compelling reason. If you had a large body of Scala projects within your company or your organization, and you had that expertise, you wanted to continue, it was faster, it was more productive. But generally speaking, and very generally speaking, you're looking more at the Java versus Kotlin type of question. And I have given talks before on Java versus Kotlin and kind of the compare and contrast. And I will say this, before Java went to a 6-month release cycle and before they started accelerating changes and updates, it really was a much more different conversation because Kotlin felt like it was from the future in many ways. So Kotlin gave you a lot of things that made you love programming again, that maybe Java, it's not that Java was bad, it's just that it felt a little longer in the tooth. And when they went to that faster release cycle and they started slipping in things for, early access or evaluation in the interim releases in between LTSs, it really kind of changed the game. And it's funny if you go back and look at some of the more recent, like what came in Java 13, 14, 15, 16, et cetera, it's closed that gap quite nicely. So it doesn't feel like there's a lot of difference. The last time I gave the talk, the Java versus Kotlin, I started off with the traditional way, and it was still quite a stark difference. But then I started implementing things, like better switch statements and records and things like that, to where you get to the end and it's not indistinguishable, but the gap is very minimal. I will say this, if you want to mix and match, they all compile to the same bytecode, and Kotlin and Java are very interoperable. So if you want to do some things in Kotlin and some things in Java, even within the same project, you can do that. I don't know that there are great compelling reasons to do that, but you can because you have that kind of flexibility and interoperability. So it's harder and harder for me to recommend going with Kotlin now as far as a first choice, but it's not like it's a bad choice.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
For the folks online.
Yeah, so I think when we have Java and Kotlin projects, and when using tooling like IntelliJ, I think Kotlin is a first-class citizen, but for Visual Studio Code, for instance, it's very hard to follow the code of other programmers because tooling is not available. But for Java, that's not the case, right? For Java, it's pretty cool and it can be used quite well.
That is an excellent point, and I thank you for bringing that up because JetBrains are the people behind Kotlin. They're also the people who make IntelliJ. So as you might imagine, support is brilliant, but much less so everywhere else. So yeah.
Great, very good question. Any other questions? I think this would be the last one we have time for. Okay, I will take that as a no. We're all questioned out. So I will give our panel time to do closing remarks or thank everyone, and also mention, if you're interested in getting more information about how we support Java and Java developers, definitely check out our kind of entry portal, which is developer.microsoft.com/Java. Panel, any closing comments?
I just want to mention we do have another panel coming up after this, and please do join the folks online and in person. We're going to be talking about choosing the right destination. We've covered some of that today, but we'll be covering it in more detail with some other folks who will be joining us as well. So please do join us 1:30 p.m. Thanks. That's it.
Great. Thank you. So again, big thank you to everyone on our panel, Brian, Bruno, who was online, Stephanie, Mark, Srikanta. I think they did a great job answering questions. And big thank you to the audience for all of your questions here, both in the room and online. Hope you enjoyed the session. Please fill out the evaluation as well.